stated that, and I quote, criminalizing United States intelligence officials estimate that nearly 23,000 violent extremists are currently operating in Syria. Among these are over 7,000 foreign fighters, among whom are dozens of Americans, a number that is probably growing. We have a mutual and we have a compelling interest in developing shared strategies for confronting the influx of United States and European-born violent extremists into Syria. And because our citizens can travel freely, visa-free, from the United States to Norway and other European states, and vice versa, the problem of fighters in Syria returning to any of our countries is a problem for all of our countries. This is a global crisis in need of a global solution. The Syrian conflict has turned that region into a great cradle of violent extremism. But the world cannot simply sit back and let it become a training ground from which our nationals can return and launch attacks. And we will not. And amended after the attacks in New York on September the 11th.
The United States is not simply going to involve itself in a military action in the absence of a political plan by the Iraqis that gives us some assurance that they're prepared to work together.
With ISIS moving so fast, do we have several days for him to review options? And he said basically it was contingent on Maliki reaching out. If Maliki does not reach out to the Kurds and to the Sunnis and decides to stick with the Shia base, what does the U.S. do then?
Well, again, leadership is important. Absence of leadership and decisiveness is important in this. It's too late to have long political reconciliation meetings that will last weeks or months to try to get through even the finest points of difference. You have an al-Qaeda army on the move. This isn't just Sunnis versus Shias. This is an al-Qaeda-minded group that is using all of the tactics of brutality to subdue Mosul and to Tikrit and other places. This is as dangerous as it gets. Why? We have thousands of Westerners and Americans in both eastern Syria and Iraq who have Western passports. This is like
you're talking about these are members of ISIS.
Well, they're showing up to fight extremists, and so some are
to fight with the extremists.
Exactly. Yeah. They're fighting with al-Nusra in Syria or ISIS, and they will go with winners. And so this is what's so dangerous. At some point, even ISIS was saying, and this has got into the dispute with al-Qaeda leadership, we want to do external operations. And by the way, we know we have these Westerners who have come to jihadist Disneyland in eastern Syria that we can further radicalize, train, and send back to Europe and send back to the United States. And that's significant, Chris, because we've had our first American used in a suicide bombing in Syria.
So let's break this down because it is complicated, yeah. Chairman. What are you saying that the U.S. should do?
Well, two things. One, we need to re-engage our Arab League partners. They have been forgotten in this, in what is really lack of decision. And by the way, without those decisions, you enable the ecosystem of terrorism to live and well.
But in a military sense,
yes.
We've got the aircraft carrier Bush. Should the president get involved? Should we launch military strikes against ISIS?
We need to do something to stop their momentum. I think you can do it two ways. One, with our Arab League partners. They have been willing for almost 3 years to get engaged in a more robust way, but they need certain things the U.S. can bring to the table. Command and control, intelligence packages, and more accurate targeting. That all is somewhat missing in this equation. So now you have an al-Qaeda army that, by the way, we believe now has 2 helicopters, which means they can move al-Qaeda army folks around the battlefield. We've never seen this before. So yes, we have to engage with our Arab League partners. I would do a two-front strategy as far as making sure we do disruption activities in Syria with al-Qaeda elements in eastern Syria as well as in Iraq.
You have talked a little bit about the Arab League and that the U.S. could be on the sidelines. Forgive me, leading from behind, if you will. Should the U.S. be directly involved? Should we be sending Tomahawk cruise missiles, jet fighters off our assets in the Persian Gulf?
Well, if we learn anything, you can't fire missiles and then turn around and come home. It has to be a coordinated effort. That's why you have to have the Arab League with you. They have the capability and special forces and other things to impact certain parts of the battlefield. We should use that. We should help them do that. And that does not mean U.S. troops on the ground. And yes, if airstrikes turn around the ability for an al-Qaeda army to march and gain more safe haven, Remember, this is all to them about gaining safe haven, which puts them on the path to their caliphate.
So
That's exactly what
if that would make a difference.
If it would make a difference. And I think there are plans. You know, we can't wait days and weeks and months to scratch our heads in some political reconciliation process. We have to ask one single question. Is al-Qaeda holding land the size of Indiana a problem for the United States? Well, it certainly was when they were in Afghanistan and had time to plan the 9/11 event. And I guarantee you this is a problem that we will have to face. And we're either going to face it in New York City or we're going to face it here. Now, again, doesn't mean troops, doesn't mean the same kind of fight. It does mean that you have to have a coordinated effort, but it has to be disruptive through tempo, meaning you can't fire and release. You have to fire and continue the pressure so that you can dismantle and empower other Arab militaries to be successful.
So when the president